All right, here's our expert. He wrote A Walk Down Abbey Road, NWA, A Walk Down Abbey Road, NWA, City of Westminster in England, London. And he wrote a book about the perspective of other rock stars about the Beatles. Did you interview all these people?
Yes, I did, and it took me 30-plus years.
Which was the most horrendous interview experience that you had? The interview experience where you went, I will never talk to this person again.
I never really had one of those, but the one regarding the Beatles, obviously it's not in the book because he wouldn't talk about it, told me he didn't like the Beatles, was a guy named Jeff Beck, the guitar player.
Now, why didn't he like the Beatles? Was it because he was too cute?
I don't know. I just think that's the way he felt about everybody, so I didn't press him.
I agree. Let's go right there. When you asked Billy Joel about his feelings toward the Beatles, his impressions of the Beatles, what were some of the things he said? Oh, wait, you have audio for this, don't you?
Yes, I do, and he'll tell you how the Beatles changed his life when he saw them on the Ed Sullivan Show.
All right, let's play the Beatles cut.
Okay.
He lived near Cold Spring Harbor, and I lived near the same body of water, and I could see his house, and I thought, gee, it would be great just to meet him and say hello, and maybe I'll just go by there one day and knock on the door. But I really respected the man's privacy, and I know he was hounded by a lot of people. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to just admire him from afar. And after his death, the guy who had worked with him told me that John used to like to row a boat, and they used to row past my house, and John wanted to come say hello to me. And that John had told him he liked my music, which absolutely knocked me out when I heard that. I didn't even know if he was aware of me. Of course, you think like that. You don't know if other people are aware of your music. And I really kind of regret not having met him, because I think it would have been nice.
Yeah, that's the part where he talks about wanting to meet John Lennon.
And what did Elton John say?
Well, Elton John he wrote a song. He's Sean Lennon's godfather. And he and John were very close. And he didn't know what to do after John was shot, and he wanted to write a song. So he wrote some music, and he gave it to Bernie Taupin, who's his songwriting partner, and they wrote a song called Empty Garden, and that's what Elton's talking about here, why he wrote it.
All right, let's listen to the cut from Elton John.
When John was killed, I wanted to write something, but I'm not very good with words, so I decided to just let it pass. And also, I didn't want to release something right at them just straight afterwards. And then Taupin came up with this song, which he didn't really give to me, so I just found it, and it says everything that I wanted to say, but without sort of being too obvious. And I'm real pleased with it. It's called Empty Garden. Hey, hey, Johnny.
Of all of the people that you talked to, all the rock stars that you talked to about the Beatles, do you recall anything that was particularly profound that you sat back and went, oh my gosh, I can't believe he thought that. I can't believe it. Please share that with us. Denny Somach.
Yes, I will tell you, and this happened 2 years ago. I was in New York. I went to a press conference at the famous Electric Lady Studios, which was Jimi Hendrix's studio. And they're having a press conference with the Isley Brothers and Santana because they had put out an album together. And I interviewed both Santana and the Isley Brothers. So when I was interviewing the Isley Brothers, I thought, oh, this is going to be great because, the Isley Brothers, their song is Twist and Shout, and that was the first song that the Beatles played that on Ed Sullivan, and they were sort of flattered because the Beatles did one of the songs that they did. So I started talking to Ron Isley, and he's, we talking about Beatles, and I said, what did you think when the Beatles came out? And he goes, well, I was sitting there with my brothers, watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan like everybody else, along with my guitar player. And I said, really? He goes, yeah, Jimi Hendrix. I said, wait a minute. Jimi Hendrix, who I knew was in the Isley Brothers for about 6 months. I just didn't know when. In other words, you were sitting in your living room watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan with Jimi Hendrix. And he said, yeah. And he said, we said to ourselves, I guess we don't have to worry. Some of these other bands, the Beatles are going to knock them out of the box. But we have Jimmy. He's a great guitar player, so we're not worried. Plus, the Beatles are doing our songs. I almost flipped out when I heard that Jimi Hendrix was sitting in the living room watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan with the Isley Brothers. That's in the book.
Now, let's talk about some other people.
First of all, did I mention that Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees wrote the foreword to the book? And their stories, each of the Monkees are also in the book. But Mickey, particularly, when I talked to him, I said, would you like to write the foreword? And he said, oh, man, I would love to. And that's how I got Mickey to write the foreword. Roy Orbison, okay? Roy Orbison told me, and he was a big star, before the Beatles came out.
Huge.
He went over to England. He was the headliner. The Beatles were the opener. He gets to England on the plane, and he is wearing his prescription sunglasses as he comes out, and realized that he forgot to bring his regular glasses. So he had to do his appearances with his glasses on. That's why he became famous for the sunglasses. But that's part of the story. The other thing was, after the first date, and the Beatles just were so unbelievable, he saw them, he said, from now on, I'm opening the show, and the Beatles are closing. I can't follow this.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool for a performer to say, you know what, I'll be the opening act. I'll be like Debbie Gibson. I'm not going to come on. Yeah. I'm not going to come on second. But there's one thing I just wanted to mention. I wanted to know as an expert how you felt about this. Whenever I see a McCartney interview, whenever I see Paul McCartney, I'm struck by two things. Number one is that he's sober and sane and knows who he is. Mm-hmm. He's rooted on earth. We haven't heard any horrible stories. Nobody seems to hate him. For a long time, I thought he was the most powerful man on earth. When he was single, I thought he was the most powerful man on earth because how would we define that? He had 100% access to the world. Any world leader would agree to see him. Any CEO would agree to see him. He can walk the earth without anybody hating him. He has all the money he could possibly need, and when he was single, any woman would have slept with him. That's how I define power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're going. Absolutely.
Right. And now he's sitting there, and I almost look at him like, okay, he knows who he is. He knows he's not going to mess with this. He's going to leave that gestalt alone. And when I watch him now, being interviewed now, it's almost as though he is putting the boomer generation to bed and tucking them in and saying goodnight, like it's his job. It's like it's his job.
That's a great analysis.
He's singing them lullabies. He's singing them lullabies. He's telling them nice, safe stories. He's letting them know it's okay. Whatever they wanted to know, now he'll tell them. He sort of is tucking in the boomer generation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I have to interview you for my volume 2.